I love my town. We're like one big family. Not only does everyone know everyone, every personal event is a village-wide event. Timmy's 8th birthday was pretty much a carnival. Mine wasn't much different back in the day. There's enough of us for a really good party, but not so many that there aren't enough days for everyone to have a special day. Although, if there's a bunch one week, we tend to do a big shebang for everyone, and smaller individual events with the immediate fam. I think it really helps the ones who decided not to get married or have kids. They don't get as lonely when there's so many people willing to celebrate with them. People who stop by to talk to them just because, who worry about them when they're sick, and volunteer to help them move heavy furniture when it's time to remodel. It's not all sunshine and roses though. By and large, things are pretty good, except for the coffins and the trees, I guess. They don't die, don't burn, don't grow past the point of mature oaks, but don't slow down other than that. It doesn't matter what's done to them. Salt, bugs, poison. Someone at some point has tried it all. So we just have to stay close by and get to work the moment someone turns 13. Accidents or illness can happen at any time, so we can't afford to wait. It just makes it really hard because the roots are still pretty small at that point. Finding the grown ones is easier. But as I said before, can't really afford to wait. Death doesn't. It was horrifying finding my own. Hard too. It was way out in the woods, not far from the old mines. Just a happy accident some teenagers tripped over the fingers poking out through the loam. Looking into my own dirt-caked face, eyes closed and features slack, haunts me to this day. I see it in my nightmares, in my unguarded moments, sometimes even in the bathroom mirror. But I'm still glad we found it. It would have been worse if we hadn't. When I was a teenager in the 90s, I remember sitting in the cafeteria listening to some of my friends talking about it with their pals from the neighboring towns. Ours wasn't big enough to have its own school, so we all went to one a town over. They didn't believe any of us, and it didn't help that it had been so long since we missed a route that none of us had ever seen what happens when you did. So it was all second and third hand accounts, just like any good urban legend. I remember that day in particular, because it was the first time I noticed more of my friends agreeing with the out-of-towners than defending our practices. And I remember almost being swayed by that lulled popular opinion, and the idea that we could just leave this tiny town behind with no consequences. When graduation came, I nearly went with them. Of the 15 kids I'd grown up with, 12 went off to college and 6 never came back. They never wrote, never visited, never spoke to us again. We kept the coffins carved out of the roots in the basement of the town hall. They're still there as far as I know. Broke their families' hearts, and damn near killed the rest of us a few years back, because it turns out they didn't just leave. They left and must have had kids. Kids we didn't know to look for. Kids that crawled their way out of the woods one night, fully grown and angry. It was the sound that woke me. Have you heard the sound of lightning striking? It's incredibly loud, like a transformer blowing. It was so loud my bed physically moved. It was 2 inches away from the wall when I rolled out of it, numb with shock and terror. I didn't understand just yet. My panicked, sleepy mind thought something had fallen over in the house. But when I stumbled downstairs and saw lights in my neighbor's windows, I began to realize that it was worse than that. as I watched something tear their front door off its hinges and toss it aside. Something dark ran past my window. I ran for the basement where I kept my coffin, and every step I took, I wish I left it in my living room. I could feel the seconds stretching into years, every heartbeat like a hammer in my throat. My breath tasted sour on my tongue. I was afraid I was going to vomit, but there was no time for that. There was no time for anything. I could hear my own front door being ripped away, the force of it pulling air out of the room. 5 steps from the basement door, I heard my neighbors screaming. 4 steps from the basement door, I heard the first footstep on my floor, wood on wood. 3 steps from the basement door, I could feel its hate-filled gaze on my back. 2 steps, 1. I got my hand around the doorknob just as it reached me. Its wooden fingers tore right through my thin pajama shirt. I didn't even feel the pain at first. It was just cold. The force of the blow threw me into the door though, which forced it open and flung me down the first 5 steps. Gravity took care of the rest. I landed in a heap at the bottom in a crumpled ball of agony. Unlike the wound on my back, I felt every bounce and roll on the way down. I was winded and struggling to remain conscious when I saw it running down the stairs. I don't know where I found the will to move. It must have been survival instincts or adrenaline. Either way, I picked myself up onto my hands and knees and crawled the last few inches to my coffin, propped up against the wall at an angle. I didn't even drag the lid all the way open. I just forced my shoulder and head into the small gap they would fit through, and heaved myself the rest of the way in. It helped the door the rest of the way shut. The thing began pounding on my coffin with both fists, over and over again, screaming in frustrated rage, while I huddled sobbing and cradling a broken arm. I stayed there until I heard the chainsaws. By then, the pounding had stopped, but I wasn't sure when. I could feel the echoing of it in my bones. Every pound had bounced the coffin. There were times I was sure it was going to shatter. I was still feeling that bouncing when the screaming finally stopped, and I heard the mayor's voice upstairs. "Hello, is anyone alive?" That was when I started screaming. I felt so weak. I'd been bleeding for God knows how long, and my arm and side were throwing red-hot sparks anytime I moved. But I still screamed. I screamed my heart out until he got down there and opened the coffin lid. I refused to leave it. I begged and pleaded to be carried out in it. Eventually, he gave in, despite my condition, and returned with 5 of the local cops. They had the hands to spare, it seemed, because there was nothing anyone else could do for my immediate neighbors. I tried not to look as they carried me in my coffin to the triage set up in the center of town, but it was hard not to see the limbs strewn in the trees, wood and flesh alike. I closed my eyes, but even then I could still hear them talking. Looks like a whole family. Yeah, we're thinking a car accident or something. Think we got them all, but we need to be on the lookout for temporary survivors. If there were, they clung on. No one else clawed their way out of the dirt that year, or for many years after. But I slept in my coffin every night from then on, as I know some of my neighbors did. I still do, because the woods are dark and deep, and there's no telling how many we missed.